Today's conversation has been sitting with me for a while, like I mentioned, almost a year, because grief is one of those things that caregivers carry that we don't talk about nearly enough. Not just the grief that comes when we lose someone, but the grief that lives inside the caregiving itself. The slow losses and the quiet ones, and the ones that arrive without warning and change everything in an instant. My guest today has lived that very thing. She has also spent her career studying it, naming it, and writing about it with a precision and warmth that I find remarkable. Dr. Rondalyn Varney Whitney is an occupational therapist, a narrative medicine practitioner, and the author of 15 books. Her newest works, Habits of Widows and Lies in the Afterlife, come directly from her own journey through grief after the traumatic death of her husband in 2020. Welcome to From Guilt to Good. When my mother died almost a year ago, I did not know what to do with everything I was carrying. And honestly, most days I still don't. So I write. I have always been a writer, but my grief gave my writing a different purpose lately. The page is one place where I can say the true thing without worrying how it will land. I'm still writing, I'm still grieving, and I'm still learning those two things. For me, they cannot be separated. Today's guest knows that too. She knows it in her bones, and she's written 2 books to prove it. Hi, my name is Jeanette Yates, and I'm the founder of the Caregiver. I cared for my own mother for several decades and now help caregivers set boundaries and use simple tools that make care and life easier so they can feel good, not guilty. Today's conversation has been sitting with me for a while, like I mentioned, almost a year, because grief is one of those things that caregivers carry that we don't talk about nearly enough. Not just the grief that comes when we lose someone, but the grief that lives inside the caregiving itself. The slow losses and the quiet ones, and the ones that arrive without warning and change everything in an instant. My guest today has lived that very thing. She has also spent her career studying it, naming it, and writing about it with a precision and warmth that I find remarkable. I'm so glad she is here. Dr. Rondalyn Varney Whitney is an occupational therapist, a narrative medicine practitioner, and the author of 15 books. Her newest works, Habits of Widows and Lies in the Afterlife, come directly from her own journey through grief after the traumatic death of her husband in 2020. She holds advanced certificates in narrative medicine from Columbia University and recently retired after more than 25 years in academia. She now lives in Western Massachusetts. Rondalyn, welcome to From Guilt to Good.
Thanks for having me. So happy to be here.
All right. So I always start here because I believe the caregiving experience, both personal and professional, is the foundation of everything we talk about on this podcast. So, Rondalyn, what is your connection to caregiving and where did it begin for you and how has it shaped where you are today?
I think I was always really interested in caring. And as I grew up in Appalachia. That was part of our culture, is to be a caring person. And I was just given that example my entire life. And so going into the profession of healthcare, like how do we care about people's health and their well-being, and to really think about that. As an occupational therapist, we help people do the things that people don't really think about missing when something happens. Like, how do you brush your teeth again if your arm doesn't work? How do you put your bra on? How do you pull your underwear up? Like those kinds of intimate moments. That's where occupational therapy steps in. And so we have to do that in a way that makes it safe for people to say, I really need help with this little thing. I'm embarrassed to talk about it, but I need help with it. So stepping into healthcare, I think gave me a whole new context, I guess, to bring something that I had kind of innately my whole life.
I totally can relate to that. Growing up, your culture is that of care. I recently was talking about how when I was growing up and my mom was growing up and her grandmother was growing up, there was never not some elderly relative living in the house, that it kind of was just, there was always great aunt so-and-so or great granny so-and-so living there. And you just kind of grew up with that family tending to that was happening all the time around you. So I can definitely see how that kind of carries through into the rest of your life. So I totally relate.
Yeah. My mom likes to tell this story when I must have been around 4. And she said she couldn't figure out where all the washcloths were going. And one day she kind of watched me and I was taking the washcloths and rolling them up and going to the neighbors, the elderly neighbors, and giving them a washcloth. Now, how I don't know what was in my little
Right.
4-year-old mind, but I was doing this thing.
Yes.
And then, as an occupational therapist, one of the things we do when we work in acute rehab, every morning we show up with a washcloth and we help people do their morning toiletries.
Full
I'm like,
circle.
I know. Early training. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. That's probably another cultural thing too, washcloths. I mean, those
Right?
were a whole thing when I
Whole
was growing up
thing.
too. You had to have a washcloth. That's so funny. I think in one of the things that you wrote or I read, you talk about the word care and how we sometimes nowadays have a different, like kind of a sunshine and roses
Right.
mindset about what it is, but it actually the root of care isn't quite as sunshine and rosy. Can you talk a little bit about the
Sure.
etymology, the word origin,
Sure. Yeah.
and what that means in practice?
Right. Well, as a writer, we love words,
Oh, I
right?
do.
And so I looked up care and was really surprised to learn that it means to worry, to
Mm.
bear up from under, to worry. And, we only worry about things we love. We only worry about things that we care about or that we love. So worry and care are really the same thing. And that makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
And so when we think about care, to bear it from under, it's really important, I think, sometimes to give ourselves permission to be a worrier, like
Mhm.
to be thoughtful, like all the what ifs that come up
Yeah.
around that. And then how do we bear up from under that? Like, how do we have the courage to love somebody, worry about the what ifs, and keep going? That's a courageous act.
I wish my grandmother were alive today to hear you say that
Mm.
because she worried about my mom so much. She worried about all of her children, but my mom especially because she was the sick one, right? And we always told her like, "Don't worry," and she would say, "I'm not worrying. I'm just." Thinking about you, or maybe even she was trying to say, like, I'm just caring. This is me caring for you. But
Right.
I'm sure in heaven now she's like, haha, see?
I told you. Should have listened to me, girl.
All right, I want to go somewhere that I think a lot of people, we need to talk about this. They need to hear this because of the way grief is presented to us in the movies and greeting cards. And even sometimes just with the people we talk to, it doesn't really match up with the experience we have. I know a lot of people think grief is just being sad, right? Like grief equals when I cry. But how does grief actually affect us beyond that little understanding that we have? And what is happening to us when we are grieving, when we are living in that grief?
Yeah, that's such an important question. And I think you're exactly right. We need to do a much better job of helping ourselves understand this and get prepared for it. Grief is a full body impact. It's like
Mm,
not unlike a stroke or, you know, cardiovascular disorder. Like it's full body.
mm,
So we have this idea that grief is an emotional impact, but it's not. It's physiological, it's occupational, it is emotional, it's all of it at once. And it changes us because it's a stress response. It changes every cell in our body. So people have all kinds of things happen that they don't really anticipate, like their muscles don't work,
mm,
or their gastrointestinal system goes crazy,
mm.
or um, their brain doesn't work. They have like a cognitive disorder, right? They can't
Right.
process, executive function disorder, physiological, people's hair changes, their eyes change, their eyesight, like
Yeah.
everything is up for grabs with the grief response.
I find this fascinating for many reasons. You're doing a great job of explaining like how it might show up. But one of the things that I wrote about at the time, and then I still tell people about it today, but my mom died almost a year ago and she was sick for a long time. She was diagnosed with an illness in 1984. So we were caregiving and living with this disease. We were both were going through it for a long time and she passed away. Funeral, all that stuff. And then, like 2 weeks later, I couldn't move my arm.
Right,
My shoulder was it had been kind of, like my bum shoulder for a while, but it stopped working.
right.
And after months of therapy and all this kind of stuff, even the doctors were like, have you gone through some, you know,
Trauma.
experience recently? And, I would say, well, my mom died, but I was caring for her a long time. And so, and they were like, no, 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 but that is why this is not, the normal treatments aren't working. It's because this isn't just a physical injury. It's a,
Right.
like
Full
you say, a
body.
systematic thing that's going on. So I
Right.
just wanted, is that kind of what you're talking
Absolutely.
about?
Absolutely. And it's a little bit, not a little bit, it's unpredictable how one's person will respond, right? Your
Mm-hmm.
body, your mind, your emotions, all of it is unpredictable. There are some things we can predict, but a lot of it is unpredictable and individualized. And that's what makes it odd. And we dismiss it, discount it. We don't connect the dots. And we
Yeah.
should be able to connect the dots. We should say, okay, you're in a grief experience, so a lot of things can happen. What's
Mm-hmm.
happening? Whatever it is, we say, okay, could this be part of the grief response? And then we can treat it with more care, to go back to that
Right.
word. We can be more intentional with our interventions and our treatment, but we don't do that.
My next question is written kind of in general, but I'm going to ask it specifically for me. But, I think one of the misunderstandings that people who are going through grief have is that they're somehow like, it's been a year. I should be kind of already
Right.
over it by now,
Right.
I want you to talk a little bit about that aspect that might be a misunderstanding that we have about like getting through grief or getting over it or something like that. Can you kind of go through that a little bit? Because I sometimes feel like I should have it together by now. Like I shouldn't be so tired. Or you mentioned like muscles. Like I feel, like I still feel very fatigued, weaker, all these kind of things. And I know a lot of my friends going through the same thing are having similar experiences. Can you talk a little bit about like the path of grief or journey? I don't know how you want to phrase it, but
Sure.
what are we missing?
Well, I think one of the first things that I would say is I think we really have to give ourselves permission to not should on ourselves, to stop
Mm,
shoulding on ourselves.
yeah.
That's a big one, I think. And people bring that to us. They bring their shoulds to us. You should be over it. You should move on. It's just whatever. And we can admit that's not helpful,
Right.
right? The other thing to think about in my mind is given that we are in fact reconfigured by loss, we're completely reconfigured down to the cellular level. We're reconfigured. Who we show up as the day after, it's different than who was there yesterday. We're just different. We're reconfigured. And that reconfiguration continues. We talk in my profession about occupational identity, who we are. So we are what we do with the habits, routines, the roles we inhabit, and the relationships within those roles and the rituals. That's who we are occupationally. We have an occupational identity. And if you take all of that and put it on a blanket and throw it up in the air, it's all gone. Like,
Yeah.
how do you how do you do laundry when it's just for you now and not you and your mother? How do I make dinner when it's just for me and not me and my husband? Like everything is up for grabs. And because everything got reconfigured, I love to tell this story about a comedian. His name is Stephen Wright. He has this wonderful line where he says, I walked into my apartment last night and somebody came in and stole everything I owned and replaced it with exact duplicates.
Wow.
And that's what grief feels like.
Mm.
It's like everything is different. So every day, all day, in every moment, we're walking through a world where everything has been stolen and replaced with exact duplicates. Everyone else walks by, it looks like the same place. But to us, we know there's nothing the same. And so all the ways that we trip across that, we get re-triggered, reorients us. And we have to reconnect the dots. We have to put the puzzle pieces back in place over and over. And I don't think, I'm only 6 years out, but it seems to me that is never going to change. That is the rest of my life,
Yeah.
to be reconfigured and to find ways to reconfigure.
Yeah. That's so, I love how you describe that, and the comedian as well. One of the, it reminded me, so my stepdad died in December of 2023, and then my mom died last summer in 2025. And I remember my mom was in the ICU on one side of town, and my stepdad was in a nursing home on the other side of town in hospice care. And so when he died, I had to get up the next morning and just go to the ICU like I did every other day. But everything, and sometimes it still happens, but definitely for the first several weeks and months after his passing, I could definitely feel like I described it as the world was just like just a shade off kilter. Like everything was still there, but it was just like crooked, like
Right.
everything
Exactly.
messed up.
Exactly.
And so I just didn't. And then to some extent, I think with my mom as well. And I've heard this from other people. It's like my whole entire world has changed. And to your point, my whole body has changed.
That's
Like
right.
every cell of my body has changed, but everybody else is not. They're, like what they're going through is different. Not that I was the only person grieving my mother, certainly, but it's this idea that I definitely just couldn't wrap my head around anything and still can't. And still,
Right. Well, and I think, you know, understanding that grief is a stress response, right? We understand stress, most of us. And if we understand grief as a stress response, then we should not be surprised that it causes cognitive challenges,
Mm.
like trying to figure things out, like, where am I? And do I turn left or right? And it's the
right.
grocery store that I've shopped at for 40 years and I still
Yeah.
don't remember how to find cheese here, right? Like, we have these moments of like the brain just doesn't work or something in the body doesn't work. So if we understand grief as a stress response, I think that's more helpful
Yeah.
than the way we framed it.
Mhm.
And it is off kilter, the world for us. I call that the afterlife. We'll
Yeah.
talk about that in a little bit, but
Yeah.
I also think that one of the things that happens when people say to us, they superimpose their belief about whatever, grief, life,
Right.
whatever. It's often trying to be helpful,
Mhm.
many times not being helpful because they aren't here.
Right.
But I do think that compassion fatigue is a real thing.
Oh,
We
yes.
talk about compassion fatigue in healthcare, we talk about
Mhm.
burnout in healthcare and so on. But I think we have compassion fatigue when somebody continues to grieve and we're like, I can't feel this anymore for you. Like, just
Yeah.
please help me out by not being in need of me
Yes.
being compassionate.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we do that to ourselves. We have compassion fatigue for ourselves because we're told we're supposed to. We're supposed to be
Mhm.
strong. We should get over it like we should on ourselves again.
Mhm.
And, it's not helpful.
Right.
What is helpful is to sit with it and care for ourselves, to do self care, to take care. That's what's helpful. But
I
I
think
don't know.
too
Society
that
doesn't do that.
right. And I think another thing is, especially in my case, there's very few people that have had a loss similar to mine. Like I have a few friends who have lost their parents, but for the most part, I'm walking around with an experience that other people have not had yet. And they want to be helpful, but they just they can't
Yeah.
wrap their head around what it is and they know it. So it's this like awkward, like you say, it's kind of this,
Right.
we're trying to help. But then to your point, I think, there is a little bit of compassion fatigue going on with people like, how long do we have to,
Right.
tiptoe around? Like,
Right.
it's hard. And then you feel like, I think that's something interesting that you talked about. Like, we almost feel like we have to tend,
Right.
like we become the caregiver for their emotional
Right.
comfort too. Then we're still
Well, and
and we know caregiving. We know how to do that. We're like, oh,
right.
I can switch back into that mode and care for
Right.
them and
Right.
tend to their emotional needs
Yeah.
about how to handle me, my grief.
And back to what you said earlier, I think that's one of the real gifts of writing is that we can put a bunch of these ideas and feelings and thoughts on paper because a page can take it.
Mm,
Um,
yes.
because I think people do get fatigued in hearing our story because it forces them to think about something they really do not want to think about. Everybody lives like nobody dies, it's the
Right.
craziest illusion.
Yeah.
And so, when we show up and we're the person with the death experience, it's a little bit traumatizing to people who are trying very hard to deny it, you
Hmm.
know? I mean, don't get me wrong. That's on them. They need to handle that. I don't want to care for it. But at the same time, I can understand it even if I don't like it.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, that's so good. That's so good. So now we're going to dive into something I do not have experience with, but you unfortunately do. And this is something that you reference in your work, and I've never heard it discussed before. So I really want to talk about it. You name something real, something that we don't talk about as a health risk, especially, but it's the widowhood effect. So tell
Right.
us what it is And why should every caregiver and the people who love them know about it?
Yeah, isn't it crazy that we don't all know about this? So it's one of the highest health risks that we have. So if you're coupled with someone, I'll use marriage because that's what I have the experience with, and they die, you have a very, very high risk of dying also within
Wow.
the first 3 months. I think it's
Mm.
something like 80%. It's really high. And it goes down little by little throughout the first year. But your first year after being left, it's a huge health risk. And no one talks about that. That you can look at all the people in your life where a half of a couple died, and you're like, oh yeah, he died, within the next year. Isn't that interesting? And then we go on like it's not a phenomena. But
Right.
researchers have looked at this for years. We know it's a
Hmm.
phenomena. And, sometimes people call it the broken heart syndrome, and that's not untrue. But what's more true is it's a severe traumatic stressor
Wow.
physiologically, occupationally, and it has the effect that traumas will have on a person. And if you are um, fortunate enough or unfortunate enough, however you want to look at it, to have loved someone so much that losing them would do that to you have a 100% chance of either being the person that loses someone or being the person that dies and leaves somebody.
Yes.
100%.
Yes.
And so this is so ubiquitous and we don't talk about it. So I went to my doctor. I had a teenager at home. I went to my doctor and I said, you have one job. You must keep me alive this year.
Oh, wow.
That's it. That's your job. And she saw me every month. I went in every month and she was great. And she's like, how you doing? I'm like, well, she's like, well, your heart rate is at 50. I'm like, great. I'm not an athlete. I should not have
Yeah.
a 50 heart rate.
Right.
That's a problem.
Right. It would be great for someone who is an athlete.
And I'm like, that's a risk factor. That's in your
Yeah.
textbook. And she's like,
Yeah.
yeah, we got to fix that. So those kinds of things happen, but no one's watching for that, even though everyone should be watching for that. So the widowhood effect is a known phenomena. We should watch for it. Of course, they call it the widowhood effect, but it also happens for widowers,
Hmm.
right? So it happens in both directions. And I think we need to do a much better job in the healthcare community of identifying that as a significant health risk and having protocols to support it.
I agree. And I want to unpack that a little bit more and learn, like, what are some of your ideas about that? This is something, like I mentioned, I am completely relating to, even though I'm not a widow or a widower. It was my mom, but I did caregive for her often, as long as somebody who is married to somebody might caregive. And then, of course, I watched what happened to my stepdad as
Right.
he had his own struggles that he was dealing with, in addition to caring for my mom before they divorced step many years ago. But I was still very close to him. But anyway, we're expected to, whether or not, and there's a lot of people that are like, take your time,
Right.
they say the right things, but then it's like, we're doing this, we're going to this, we're having, there's all this stuff still happening, and you still feel like you're moving in slow motion, right? um so what does it actually look like for people who are maybe listening, that know a caregiver and love a caregiver that's grieving? What does it actually look like for us as grieving caregivers to be tended to? What needs to change? What are some examples that you have for us? Some
Yeah,
ideas?
it's a really great question. I think we go back to that same word again about care. And we look at in occupational therapy with occupational identity, we look at the role, we look at the habits, the routines, and the rituals.
Hmm.
And so when we're trying to care for somebody, we want to encourage them to develop skills for self-care. Like, what are the habits that you're developing? Are they positive and supportive or maladaptive?
Hmm.
Right. So some of us choose maladaptive strategies like
Right.
sleeping all day or I don't know, not eating or like pick anything in there you want. Substance use, like there's a whole long list of things that are not very helpful. But on the other side of that column are things that are very helpful. Are you eating well? Like for me, I literally put up a chart, 3 vegetables, X number of things of protein. Like, did I drink my water? Like setting out the bottle of water. Like it's still
Right.
full today. Tomorrow I have to drink that bottle of water. And, like setting up my environment to support me for my self care because I didn't have anyone else watching me. I had to do
Right.
that for myself. But I did have people come and go who knew to look for things like that and set things up in my environment. Like one friend said, we need to get these edges out of the way. Let's put some soft pillows in your living
Mhm.
room space so it feels softer in here. So she was lovely and she knew to look for that. Or another friend that would go by and say, I'm taking the dog to the vet. Why don't you just hop in the car and go for a drive with me? It got me out of my house. So
Mhm.
putting people back into the habits and the routines in life to help them re-identify who they are within their role. Like my role of mother had to change. My role of wife went to widow. I had to like
Mhm.
occupy that role. You know, again, the word occupy means to seize time and space. So I had to like
Right.
fully occupy this new role. So that piece of self-care, I think, gets to be very, very important. And as people look to see, are you generating some habits of self care? Are you developing some new routines that are helpful to your
Mhm.
health and well being, cognitively, emotionally, physically, occupationally? I think that gives us a much better frame for providing actual authentic care as opposed to like, I don't know, whatever else they're trying to do.
Right. I love that you're talking about this. And I did want to we've mentioned occupational identity a couple of different times. And I think what you're describing is actually relearning or re-identifying as part of that occupational identity. Is that what you've basically already been saying?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you went through caregiving with your mother, and you know that over time she had to rehabilitate the way she did things,
Right.
right?
Right.
Pick anything you want, it's all there. Dressing, flossing,
Yeah.
flushing,
Right.
the whole thing, it's all there. So when I became a widow, I had to rehabilitate myself in the same way as if I had had an insult of some kind.
Hmm.
There was no protocol for that. I saw nothing written about that. I mean, I read all the
Right.
time. I had nothing. And I
Right.
even read the literature on grief intervention. And some of the seminal researchers said, okay, we came up with this really great intervention and it's really terrific. And there's 4 areas. And we were able to hit 3 of the 4 and people were better. But this one thing we never could get at. And then they went on to describe occupations. I'm like,
Yeah.
dudes, we have a
Yeah.
profession about this.
Right.
Right?
Well, and I love the framing of self-care as occupational therapy or occupational identity, this idea, because of course, caregivers, we all hate it when people talk to us about taking care of ourselves while we're taking care of other people. We try, we do our best. I'm an advocate for us taking care of ourselves while we're taking care of other people, but still, what that looks like while we're caring for someone else will change when we lose them. And
That's
so, this
exactly right.
idea of re-identifying what it means to tend to ourselves, I think is something that even caregivers who are rolling their eyes about the idea of self-care can say, yeah, so whatever I come up with now to get through this time this season I'm in, I'm going to have to rethink this. I'm going to have to rehab it, I think is one of the terms that you've used. And so I like this idea of that being one of the things that we do as part of our grieving process is this occupational identity or re re-identifying. I don't know if I'm saying it right,
Yeah,
but
no, absolutely.
feel free to clarify.
No, 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 absolutely. And again, I confess, I don't think I was at my best level of sanity during my grieving process. Probably, to tell you the truth, I don't think I ever will be. I'm a new person. I'm a little
Right.
goofier, but I came up with this idea that today me has to take care of tomorrow me. Because when I
Ooh.
get to tomorrow, there's no one there for me. I have to take care of me today. So I would, like I said, I would set out my water bottle, or I would
Mhm.
go shopping and make sure, I'd make a menu. I'd go shopping and make sure that when tomorrow me showed up in front of the refrigerator, there was some protein there that I could
Mhm.
just slurp down.
Right.
Because I know that girl that's going to show up tomorrow. She doesn't want to chew anything. Like I've
Right.
met her. So like, so today me had to take care of tomorrow me, and tomorrow me will be very sad if she wakes up and there's dishes in the sink. She
Right.
just will, because we used to have a kitchen fairy show up and do dishes when I didn't
Yes.
do them, but he's gone.
Yeah.
So I had to really think about caring for tomorrow me. And
Oh, I really
tomorrow
like that.
me can't have a stomach ache because today me ate a box of Oreos, right?
Right.
Like that won't be very kind.
Yeah.
So I had to think like that because I didn't have any other way to frame it. And I know it's a little crazy talk,
No, I
but at
love
the same
that.
time, it worked for me.
Today me always agrees to things that tomorrow me doesn't want to do also.
Right. Right. So
So
tomorrow
thinking
me,
about like, are you really going to feel like doing all those things you said
no,
that you want to
no,
do? And chances are
no,
no.
no.
Because I'm still in the I'm really tired phase of the
Exactly.
grieving. So I want
Right.
to switch to something that both of us love, and that's writing. I, you know, don't know what I would do without it. But your doctoral work created an online journal writing program for mothers raising children with behavioral disorders. Do I have that
Right.
right? Okay.
Right.
So, how did that research lead you to journaling as a tool for your own healing after your husband died? Like, tell me, did any of that translate for you into that? And
Absolutely.
talk a little bit
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was working with children with autism, bipolar, all kinds of different disorders. And I noticed that something is just so obvious that if mom wasn't happy, nobody in the family was happy. Like I figured that out, brilliant side of autism, right? And I learned with my research that in fact, the maternal stress predicts the entire family's stress.
Oh,
The father's stress doesn't predict anything. It's not predictable. But the mother is 100% predictive. So I'm like, wow, that's fascinating. So we need to have some kind of stress reduction for mothers, and that will help
mm,
the children and the families. So, but mothers raising these children spend 2 to 3 hours more a day just on childcare. So they don't have time to get out of the house and they can't afford a babysitter. And even if they could, they've gone through all the babysitters in the community because they
right.
have challenging children. So that's why I came up with the online intervention. I had fortunately read the work of James Pennybaker, who is the guy out of Texas who started researching journal writing, I don't know, 4 decades ago. And he kept finding whatever population he worked with did better. So people
Mm,
got jobs faster, they healed better, they recovered from cancer more frequently, like all these things. And but he didn't know why. He didn't know what the active ingredient was, but over time he discovered the active ingredient for journal writing was emotional disclosure. And he created a program to measure the number of emotionally laden words one uses in writing, good or bad. Like you can have a bad emotion or a good, doesn't matter, as long as there's an emotional vomit on the page.
oh, wow.
So
Yep. Just get it out.
get it out, get it out. So when Bill died, that's the only thing that occurred to me was okay, if I just show up to the desk every day and write, they say you have to live a year and a day. I'd heard that over and over.
Hmm.
So I thought, okay, I've got to live for a year and a day. And if I write every day for a year and a day, I will have a tool to help me. Just one. Nobody else is showing up with anything. I got this, right? And
Right.
this can show up for me every day. And so I used what I learned in my research to help me. And
Hmm.
at the end of writing for a year and a day, guess what? Nothing magical happened, except that a year and a day was gone. I learned about, showing up for myself. I learned about getting it out. I learned that nothing was, in fact, something, that it's an emptiness in a space of invitation. And that was
Yeah.
powerful. But then my son said to me, my son is a total funny wackadoo. And my son said to me, Mom, I think that really helped you. I think you should keep writing.
Oh,
And so I'm
wow.
like, okay, that's a great idea. And so I kept writing. And the next voice that came out, she was not happy. She was mad and she had a lot to say. So that became my
I was going to
second
say,
book
these are the
called
two books then.
That's the two books. So the all the lies in the afterlife is a rant. It's like, and let me tell you what else. And you know what else is a lie? And let me tell you this. And that's a lie too. And that's a lie. And that's a lie. And you know what else is a lie? And why did they anyway? So she was not happy. And so I hope my mother never reads that book because it uses a lot of words that she would have to get her bar soap out for.
Right.
But that's the two books. So I learned early in life that writing was helpful. I learned with my research that it was predictable to be
Hmm.
helpful for stress. I learned what is the active ingredient, which was emotion. And I was not being given really anything else. The doctor offered me medication. I'm like, I don't want that. This was predictable. This was solid. I knew to trust it. And so I just showed up to the page every day for a year and a day, plus another 6 months. And that was really helpful for me.
So I love that that was going to be my next question was, tell us about habits of widows and lives in the afterlife. So just to recap, the habits of widows, that's the year and a day grief, writing for a year and a
Yeah,
day.
the process
And
and all the occupations. Like, today I learned I had to, when we went to file the will, and the woman was such a nutcase, and she was just so hateful. I don't know why, but she was. Or when I had to get death certificates, or, there was a day when I had to get something. I became best friends with people at UPS, and I had to get something notarized, but also witnessed. So I go there to do that. And the guy, I said, I need to get this witness. And the guy turns to whoever does that. And he said, can I get a witness? And I broke into song. I was a total crazy woman. And they all sang with me,
Well, there you go.
There you go. So like I wrote all of that down. So that was a year and a day. That's habits of widows, all the different habits that I had to engage in throughout the year. Every day was lovely. Every day was horrible. And then the year ended. And then
your son says, keep writing.
Keep writing.
And then
lives in the afterlife is like, they should tell you to get 10 death certificates. They should totally tell you that. Why don't they tell you that? Like, that would be helpful information, or just all of that and all the crazy stuff, like, here's my other favorite thing in Lives in the Afterlife. You may or may not know this, but when you go to, Bill was cremated. When I went to pick up the cremains, they put them in a bag that has the logo of the funeral home on it. Like, anyone on the planet would want that bag.
Right.
Almost everyone gets that bag. It's a new thing. It's like a swag bag. And it's so stupid.
Right.
Like, and so I talk about that in Lives in the Afterlife. It's like, what? Why?
Yeah.
Right. Well, I've got this whole rant about imagining going to the grocery store with this bag and just acting like in my witch costume, because I have one, and just totally playing it up. Like, that would be so fun, right? Or like, just the end of that little rant. If they really wanted to be helpful, they could give me a bag like they give me at my local liquor store that holds 6 bottles of wine. That would be helpful. I mean, you'd be in line, and everyone that had that particular bag, we would know to not judge each other for getting 6 bottles of wine.
We're here for the same.
We're all here together, and maybe we get a discount because we have the funeral swag bag. I don't know. Like, anyway, that's what Lies is about.
I love that you have these two separate bodies of work that kind of we all have those, at least two, voices,
Right.
there's the angel and the,
right.
And I relate to that too, because now I wrote and published my book it was about my caregiving experience with my mom before she passed away. And I remember thinking, like, I want to tell the truth in here, but I'm a little bit worried about telling the truth. And I ended up telling the truth, but in a way that I felt like even if Mom did happen to read the book, she wouldn't be totally but there is that, yes, it was, a beautiful time and an experience. And I feel blessed to have been able to take care of my mom and all of those things. But then also it really stunk, and I hated it a lot of the times. And she and I fought a lot, and there's all that too. And there's both of those things. And then even this is something I've just started talking about out loud, but it's something I wrote about a lot is, those last couple of months that she was alive, it was like, why is it taking so long for this?
Yeah.
Because she and I had both, well, you're never ready, but we both like understood what was happening. And we were both like, and every time I would go see her, she would say, is today the day?
Right.
Like, I don't know,
Right.
And then of course, I have that going on in my mind. So I love that there's this, there's the day-to-day, like you say, the relearning how to live your life, habits of widows. And then there's like, and another thing.
Right.
In the life, like we need both of those. We need like, I don't want my mom, we need both of that, as we're experiencing grief too. Like, I didn't want my mom to die, but I also was wondering how long it was, she was still going to be here. Like, like there was both of those things happening. And that's, sometimes we don't want to admit that, but I think it's the more we share our experiences out loud, the more it allows other people to let go of the guilt of their own
Absolutely.
expressions and feelings.
Exactly. I mean, I think what you talk about of, guilt to good really is such an important way for us to think that, you know, at the end of the day, we're human.
Hmm.
And I don't know any human being who's like great all the time. We all have our, fatal flaws. And I learned in watching an anime with my son that, we have to move forward when there's no good decision
Mm.
and that we have to choose with no regret. And I love that. Like one of the most brilliantly wise things I've ever learned was in an anime of all things. Um,
Some of those movies are really good.
Really good. It's really good. And so, you know, sometimes my today me really messed up and tomorrow me was not at all happy.
Hmm.
She showed up and she's like, Girl, you let me down yesterday, and so on, that we're not perfect. And my son said to me at one point, he put his arm around me and he said, Mom, I'm really thriving. I'm thriving.
Oh.
And you're not thriving yet, but
Oh.
you're on the path. And then another day he said to me, and again, I wrote these things down because he's a funny kid. And another day he said something to me like, Mom, before dad died, you were a Wonder Woman every day. And you're just not a superhero anymore. I'm sorry. But you're a really good human, but just not a superhero. And it's okay.
I was going to say that sounds so freeing in a way. Like,
It
oh,
was
okay, I can
it
just
was
be a
free.
human.
I can just be a human.
That also reminded me of something. Hang on, gonna forget it. It's gone. Dang it. It was so good.
It'd come back.
Yeah, it'll come back. But or if not, it's fine. But I did want to have us as we wrap up and start to close here, I want you to think about, the listener today, most of the people that join us for the podcast, they are, these are caregivers either in the middle of it, just started, or sometimes they are like me and have just closed that chapter of caregiving. If someone is in the middle of grief right now, they feel like they're losing themselves. So they're like we were talking about that off kilter, or everybody came in and changed everything with exact duplicates. What is one thing that you want them to know?
I heard this thing one time and I really love it. A friend of mine said to me, before you can create anything, you have to first create nothing. Otherwise, you're just moving paint around on the canvas.
Wow.
And I think when we're in this reconfiguration moment, it's very important to understand that what I came to at the end of the year was I was like an empty bowl, like an emptiness. And empty was not bad. It was like an invitation for what's next. And that each time I felt lost or, you know, who I showed up as that day was incompetent,
Mm-hmm.
that I was creating this emptiness into which a new something was coming. It was an invitation, and that was okay. That was
Mm-hmm.
enough. Creating the emptiness some days was enough, and to trust that something would come. And I could trust something would come because something always came. So that's what I would say. It's not much, but it's a lot to give yourself
Well, and
permission.
I think you mentioned something earlier about like the, you know, the emptiness or the nothing, or the slowing down of things. And I think that, in the work I do with technology and using tools for even just like us getting on this call today, right? 3 or 4 tools. There's all this emphasis on more efficiency, more productivity, all of these things. And that slow work, that deep work, that clearing of everything. Maybe sometimes technology can help us clear out a little bit, but I do like that idea of the white canvas, the blank page, the sitting in that space and allowing something to come on its own time instead of forcing out, you
I
know.
mean, we understand that if we've had an injury, like if
Mhm.
we fall and break our hip or we dislocate our shoulder, we understand there's a healing time. There's a healing process. We don't say, "Oh, I got to hurry and get over this," or, "What's wrong with you? You're not walking on this hip that you just broke yesterday." Like we don't
Right.
say that, but we say that with grief, even though grief is much more of an insult to us than a torn muscle or a broken bone.
Yeah.
And I just think that's the wrong frame.
Hmm. Yeah. I like that. So before I let you go, I want to make sure that our listeners know where they can find your work, follow you, and if you have any resources or anything else you'd like to share, now's your time.
Now's my time. Well, my books are on Amazon, so that's an easy place to go to find them. I do have a website where I put some poetry and some other of my writing if people want to look at that. I hope in the next week to have my handout for today posted on my website. That, as you said,
Yeah,
technology.
so just go to her website, and I will put that
Yeah,
in the description so they can get
yeah.
there.
And I'm all over Facebook and
Yeah,
social media.
all the
I'm old,
places.
so I'm out there. Like, so I'm a pretty easy person to find.
As things have come up, you've signed up, and then you're like me.
There I am.
I know. I went to post something the other day on X, formerly known as Twitter, and I was like, gosh, like I've just had so many things that I've signed up for and then used to use a lot. Now I don't use. So I get it. But I will put that in the description. And, I really appreciate your time. And you specifically mentioned the poetry on your website. And I do want to encourage everybody to go and read it. I read it and it was very moving. And so I really thank you for sharing your words, your work, and for being here today.
Thank you.
And y'all, if this conversation landed somewhere real for you, please share it with a caregiver in your life, someone who is carrying something hard and needs to know that they are not carrying it alone. And if you haven't already, please subscribe so that you never miss an episode. You can find more resources in our description. You can find more resources at JeanetteYates.com. And until next time, feel good, not guilty.